Valera, why are you shouting? Olia asked, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to hide the fear creeping into her heart. Why are you so nervous? Valera suddenly jumped up from the couch, his face flushed with anger, his fists clenched. You're driving me crazy, he roared, his voice echoing through the small apartment. How I'm sick of you. Sick of your whining, your endless demands, his thoughts raced, chaotic and bitter. Mom always told me to open my eyes, but I never listened to anyone, he thought, staring at Olia with a mix of resentment and something almost like regret. She stood there, frozen, her eyes wide and filled with tears, her lips slightly parted in shock. Valera, what are you talking about? Olia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She took a step back, as if trying to distance herself from the storm of his anger. We're husband and wife. I love you. We have Suryasha. So what? Valera snapped, his voice dripping with irritation. He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration boiling over. Does that mean I have to suffer with you my whole life? You're like a peasant, stubborn, backward, stuck in your ways. Olia's breath hitched, her tears spilling over. I've never lived in a village, she protested, her voice breaking. I've done everything for you. Everything. You don't have to live in a village to be one. Valera shot back, his words sharp as knives. The peasant is inside you, Olia. In your mind, in the way you just exist. I'm filing for divorce. I don't want to spend another day with a woman who's let herself go. Olia wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her eyes searching his face in disbelief. Valera, what are you saying? She whispered, her voice shaking. I've only gained 3 kilos. 3. But you have gained them. He snapped, his voice rising again. And it's not just about the weight. It's about everything. The way you've just given up. I want you out. Take whatever you need and go. Olia stared at him, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This wasn't the man she had married. This wasn't the life she had imagined. But this is my apartment, she said, her voice suddenly firm. My parents left it to me. Valera hadn't expected that. He had grown so used to Olia obeying his every command, agreeing with his every word, that this sudden defiance caught him off guard. His face twisted in anger. So you're petty and mercenary too. He spat. Fine. I'll leave. But don't think this is over. I'll prove you and that son of yours have been living off me all these years, and I'll take this apartment. He stormed into the bedroom, yanking open the closet and grabbing a duffel bag. He began throwing his clothes into it with reckless abandon, not caring that some of them crumpled or tore. Olia followed him, her heart pounding in her chest. Valera, don't go, she pleaded, standing in the doorway, her hands clutching the frame as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. How will we manage without you? What about Suryasha? Valera didn't even look at her. You've always only thought of yourself, Olia, he said coldly, shoving past her and heading for the door. Now it's my turn. Olia's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, her body racked with sobs. The apartment felt suddenly empty, the silence deafening. She had sent Suryasha to her parents earlier that day, hoping to spend the evening alone with Valera. It was their 7th wedding anniversary. She had planned a quiet dinner, maybe a walk in the park, a chance to reconnect. But now, everything was shattered. Valera walked down the street, his chest tight with a mix of anger and something he refused to name. The evening air was cool, but it did little to calm the storm inside him. He had always known, deep down, that the apartment wasn't his. But he had hoped foolishly, perhaps, that Olia would be the one to leave. She loved playing the victim, after all. Once, her gentleness, her naivety, had charmed him. But now, those same qualities grated on his nerves like sandpaper. And then there was Angela. Angela was different. She was strong, independent, a woman of steel. When she had first noticed him, Valera had felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he had felt alive. He hadn't planned to leave Olia today, but as he neared the house, the date on his phone had caught his eye, their anniversary. He hadn't bought flowers. He hadn't even wanted to. The thought of sitting through another evening of Olia's sighs, her silent reproaches, her endless, suffocating love, had been more than he could bear. So he had decided to go on the offensive. Angela wasn't thrilled to see him standing at her door with a bag slung over his shoulder. She raised an eyebrow, her arms crossed over her chest. "Moving in?" she asked, her voice cool and detached. Valera shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "Yeah," he muttered. "Are you happy?" Angela let out a short, humorless laugh. "Happy," she repeated, stepping aside to let him in. "I'm not your therapist, Valera. But if you're here, you're here. I have work in the morning." She turned and disappeared into the bedroom without another word, leaving Valera standing in the dimly lit hallway, feeling oddly deflated. "Now that's a woman," he thought to himself, running a hand over his face. "She says it like it is." Olia couldn't understand what she had done wrong. She had cooked Valera's favorite meals every day. She had given up her career, despite her good education, to stay home and take care of their family. She had kept her parents at a distance when Valera wanted space. She had done everything he asked, everything he needed. So why had he treated her like this? Why had he looked at her as if she were nothing? The next morning, Olia scrolled through her phone contacts with trembling fingers. She found Nikolai, her university class representative. After graduation, he had immediately started working in their field, while she had chosen a different path. A few years ago, they had run into each other by chance at a cafe. "Olia, you're so smart," he had said, his eyes warm with genuine admiration. "Why aren't you working?" "I have a small child," she had replied, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. "Really?" Nikolai had smiled. "Congratulations. I thought you'd given up on everything." She had felt a pang of shame then, and she had only taken his number to end the conversation quickly. It had been even more awkward because Nikolai had once tried to court her, years ago, before she had chosen Valera. Back then, she hadn't regretted her choice not for a second. She had even been annoyed with Nikolai, dismissing him as someone who couldn't possibly understand real happiness. He was so obsessed with his career. But now, everything was different. Olia took a deep breath and dialed his number. Her heart pounded in her chest as the phone rang once, twice. "Hello." Nikolai's voice was warm, familiar. "Nikolai, it's Olia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause. "Olia," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Of course, I recognize you. What's wrong?" Olia closed her eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "I wanted to ask," she began, her voice trembling. "Could you help me find a job? I haven't worked since university, but I haven't forgotten anything. I need this, Nikolai." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Olia's stomach twisted with anxiety. Had she made a mistake? Had she put him in an awkward position? But then Nikolai's voice came through, enthusiastic and warm. "Of course, I can, Olia. Let's meet and talk. I'll tell you all about what we do, and you can tell me what you're interested in. When are you free?" Olia felt a surge of relief, so strong it nearly knocked her off her feet. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice steadier now. "I can meet you tomorrow." "Perfect," Nikolai said. "Text me the time and place." "I'm looking forward to it, Olia." When she hung up, her hands were trembling. She hadn't felt this brave in a long time, maybe ever. Nikolai was genuinely glad to see her. They met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place Olia had avoided for years. Too busy, too loud, too alive. But now, as she sat across from Nikolai, a cup of coffee steaming between her hands, she felt something inside her begin to wake up. They talked for almost 3 hours. Nikolai told her about his work, about the projects he was passionate about the team he had built. Olia listened, her eyes wide with fascination. She had forgotten what it felt like to be interested in something, to feel her mind spark with ideas and possibilities. "So what do you think?" Nikolai asked, leaning forward slightly. "Would you like to give it a try?" Olia didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "Yes, I would." Nikolai smiled, and in that moment, Olia felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she felt hope. A week later, Olia started her new job. She loved it. She loved the challenge, the sense of purpose, the way her mind was engaged in ways it hadn't been in years. She took on every task with enthusiasm, stayed late when she needed to, asked questions, learned. And soon, her hard work was noticed. 2 years later, Olia was the head of her department. She walked Suryasa to his first day of school that morning, her heart swelling with pride as she watched him skip ahead of her, his backpack bouncing with every step. She remembered her mother's words from that terrible night. Even bad experiences are still experiences. And her mother had been right. "Mom, how do I look?" Olia asked, twirling in front of the mirror. She smoothed down the fabric of her dress, her heart fluttering with nerves. Suryasha looked up from his phone, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "Mom, you look great, as always," he said, grinning. "If Dad weren't around, I'd tell everyone you're my girlfriend." Olia laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Nikolai peeked out from the living room, his eyes warm as he took her in. "Who's trying to steal my most beautiful woman in the world?" he teased, walking over to slip an arm around her waist. Olia leaned into him, her heart full. "Ready to go?" she asked, her voice soft. "Ready," Nikolai said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Let's walk. The weather's too nice to drive." They stepped outside, the sun warm on their faces, the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Olia took a deep breath, savoring the moment. She had worked so hard to get here to this place of happiness, of peace, of herself. "Mom, why are you smiling?" Suryasha asked, looking up at her with a curious tilt of his head. Olia reached out and ruffled his hair affectionately. "Just happy," she said, her voice light. "The weather's lovely. You're my amazing son." "And your dad," she glanced at Nikolai, her heart swelling. "Your dad's pretty great too." "That's true," Suryasha agreed, slipping his hand into hers. "I'm lucky to have you both." Olia's smile widened. "We're lucky to have you," she said, squeezing his hand. They laughed together, the sound echoing down the street, bright and full of promise. Olia didn't immediately hear the voice calling her name. "Olia!" She turned, her smile faltering as she saw Valera standing a few feet away, his eyes wide with shock. He looked different, older, tired. There was a bald spot at the crown of his head, and his clothes hung loosely on his frame, as if he had lost weight without gaining anything in return. "I almost didn't recognize you," he said, his voice tinged with something like awe. Olia felt a pang of something pity, maybe, or just the ghost of what they had once been. "But I recognized you," she said quietly. Valera's gaze flickered over her, taking in the confidence in her stance, the brightness in her eyes. "You look great," he said, his voice gruff. "Like no time has passed." "Thank you," Olia said, turning slightly away. She didn't want to talk to him. She didn't want to dredge up the past. But Valera wasn't done. "So this is my son," he said, his eyes on Suryasha, who had stepped slightly in front of Olia, as if to shield her. "All grown up." "I almost didn't recognize him." "Yes," Olia said, her voice cool. Suryasa's expression hardened. "Are you my biological father?" he asked, his voice steady. Valera's face twisted into something like a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Why complicate things?" he said, spreading his hands. "Just call me Dad." "No," Suryasha said firmly. "I have a father." He gestured to Nikolai, who stood silently beside Olia, his arm still around her waist. "He's the one who helped me with my homework, who bought me things, who gave me advice. You're just the guy who provided the biological material." Valera's face flushed, his pride wounded. "Well, maybe so," he muttered. "But I'm still your father." "I ask you never to call yourself my father again," Suryasha said, his voice sharp with finality. "It's unpleasant for me, and my mother." He turned to Olia, his expression softening. "Let's go, Mom. Dad's probably waiting for us." Olia nodded, slipping her hand into Suryasa's. Together, they turned and walked away, leaving Valera standing there, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with shock. "Where the hell did I send you?" Angela's voice cut through the air like a whip, sharp and furious. Valera flinched, turning to see her storming toward him, her hands on her hips, her face twisted with anger. "Angela, I'm coming," he called, his voice desperate. "Coming." Angela snapped, her voice rising. "You should be running back already. What an idiot you are. Don't you understand anything?" Valera opened his mouth to protest, but the words died in his throat as he caught sight of Olia, Suryasha, and Nikolai standing a little ways down the street. They were watching the scene with faint smiles, as if amused by the spectacle. Olia met his gaze, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Valera felt a pang of something regret, maybe, or just the bitter taste of his own failure. But then Angela's voice rose again, and the moment was gone. "Angela, don't yell in the street," he said weakly, but she ignored him, her tirade continuing unabated. Olia turned away, slipping her arm through Serioza's. "Let's go," she said softly, her voice warm with affection. "Your dad's waiting for us." And with that, they walked away, leaving Valera behind, his heart heavy, his pride in tatters. Olia didn't look back.